We are now going to have a conversation with Brad Moodie. He's been tackling some of the difficult passages in the Bible, and today he's going to be tackling one pretty perplexing passage, Lawson, about slavery in the Bible. Brad, good morning to you. It's great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's good to be back, guys. And hopefully you guys are keeping well. Yes, today we are tackling Exodus 21 and verse 20 to 21. One of those passages that skeptics of the Bible and the God of that Bible love to quote, throwing to Christians saying, I'm not going to love or serve this God who apparently endorses the beating of slaves. You see, this is what the verse actually says. And if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he continue a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. Now, on the surface, that sounds horrific. Like God is giving a free passage to beat someone almost to death. But once we zoom out, even a little, the picture changes dramatically. Firstly, the word there in that text, slave, is the Hebrew word ebed. And it's not the same thing as the race-based, lifelong chattel slavery of the American South or the Roman Empire that perhaps people are familiar with the terminology of slave. Mm-hmm. In Israel, it covered two different realities, one of which was the Hebrew debt servants. Okay, so this is like the fellow Israelites who had fallen into poverty and sold their labor or sold themselves into labor in order to repay their debts. Now, are you guys familiar with this servitude that the Israelites would go into when they had a debt that they couldn't pay? And are you aware of any limitations that were placed on that biblically?
Well, some of that I can think of is that they could not be in that situation for longer than 7 years. After 7 years, their debts, whatever left over, would be forgiven, and they could just go away free.
Absolutely. And this is exactly what it says earlier in the passage. In verse 2, it says that it would be for a maximum of 6 years, and then they would go free in the seventh. So if you buy a Hebrew servant, the text says, 6 years he shall serve, and in the seventh he shall go out free for nothing. So just 18 verses earlier, it says that they go out automatically free. And then in Deuteronomy 15, it adds that they leave with grain and wine and livestock, basically a severance package, as we might term it today. And so this is not necessarily slavery as we know it, but more of a type of indentured servitude, particularly for the Israelites. Now, we do have to clarify that there was non-Israelite servants that were purchased from the surrounding nations or taken in defensive wars, and these could be held longer, even permanently, and passed to the children of the person that purchased them, as Leviticus 25 tells us. And that part is genuinely harsher and closer to what we call slavery. But here's the key. The beating law that we just read in verses 20 to 21 and the injury laws that are spoken of in verse 26 to 27 apply equally to both groups. And I'm going to clarify what those verses in 26 and 27 are in just a second. But there is no distinction in the text between those laws being applied to both those that are Hebrew servants and those that are non-Israelites. That makes a huge difference. Now, do you know if this was a common practice as far as slavery is concerned back in the day? Are you guys familiar with slavery back then, and whether this was something normal for nations to do when they would have slaves that were indentured, or if they were foreign purchasers or whatnot?
Absolutely not. It wasn't normal to treat slaves with any level of dignity or care or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. So, if we compare this to pretty much every other law code that we have from the ancient Near East, the Hammurabi and the Hittites and the Middle Assyrian laws, if you killed someone else's slave, let's just say killed them, not injured them, but killed them, you paid a fine, and that was it. Property damage. So in Israel, if you kill your own servant, even a foreign one, get that, you yourself are executed. He shall surely be avenged. Now, that phrase means capital punishment. The servant's life is treated as sacred, not just an economic asset. the clause that it goes on to say is if he survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, is not a loophole for cruelty that you beat him to within an inch of his life and then allow him to go free or whatever, and you're not going to have any implications. It's about proving murderous intent in a world that was without autopsies. Right, so nobody could really tell how the servant had died after a couple of days. So if the person lingers and then dies, you can't prove that the rod blow was the direct cause, such as infection or internal bleeding or whatever. So the court can't actually impose the death penalty automatically in that case. But listen to what happens.
It's like a presumption of innocence here, right, Brad? It's
exactly.
Like we're seeing the presumption of innocence here because look, because someone could they could call. Let's say that someone dies. Okay, let's say the slave died, and then they would call witnesses to judge it because they need to determine, hey, did he die because the owner was a murderer and killed the slave? And they're gonna say someone can come and say, hey, look, I saw the slave owner beating him up a day or two before, and basically what the law says, look, a day or two before, then because he could have died for something else other than the beating, and it could have been a coincidence. Right. So you're actually giving the people what we call a fair go in terms of saying, look, in Australia we use that term manslaughter, but you have beyond reasonable doubt. And that's what it is. We're looking at 6,000 years before already saying, hey, this is the principle of beyond reasonable doubt here.
That's right. Yes. And this is why it's so poignant to recognize what it says a couple of verses down in verse 26 and 27. It says, if any man strikes the eye of his servant and destroys it, he shall let the servant go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his servant, he shall let him go free because of his tooth. So notice this, that permanent injury of any kind, even a single tooth, triggers immediate, no questions asked manumission. Yeah. Let him go free. Show me one other ancient culture that freed a slave for losing a tooth. There isn't one. The point is that God is about equity and fairness, as you were just highlighting, Joseph. He's about bringing the best possible result and making sure that the best outcome is achieved for both parties, without overreaching, whether it be to the slave's behalf or on behalf of the slave owner. But somebody may say about that phrase that he is his money still feels fairly dehumanizing. How would you guys answer that?
Yeah, look, this thing about my translation that I'm reading here from the New American Standard, it says here, he is his property. Let me see, there's a footnote here saying, or money. Look, what I would say is this, my understanding is that slavery in the ancient times, it's very different from the kind of slavery in the mercantile economy that we are usually we usually refer to, or the slavery that we see throughout other cultures of the world. Because if you're a slave, for example, there's a famine in the land and you have absolutely nothing to sustain yourself on, what is it better?
Yes.
There was no Centrelink, there was no government support or central government system to help anyone out. So you either die of starvation or you sell your labor, your workforce for some time. And similar things happen in these, as you mentioned, defensive wars that Israel fought.
Yes.
So the option is either we execute or kill someone, or they become servants and slaves, and we still have them under control in that regard. It was, look, slavery is bad. Let's just put it back there. However, sometimes God had to give people, okay, what is the least worst? What is the least worst? Is that saying, look, losing your hand, is it better to lose a hand or to die altogether? I would say both of them are very bad, and I don't desire anything to anyone. But if I didn't have any option, and I have a hand that is going to infect my whole body, it's better to get rid of that hand and still be alive. And this is one of the things that I see in the Bible. God is really trying to tell people, hey, this is the lesser of two evils.
That's exactly right. Yes. And so keeping in mind here, talking about his money, just coming back to that, and I'll come on to what you were just sharing there in a second as well. But keeping in mind here, we're using economic language, acknowledging a brutal reality. Like, see, servants represented a huge financial investment, but the same laws, notice this, the provision that was made for them, apart from what we've just discussed, particularly the servants, right? That even the foreign ones, every single servant could rest on the Sabbath. They could eat the Passover, and they were invited to join the rejoicing at the festivals. And kidnapping a person to sell them into slavery, that's considered capital crime. And that's the very thing that fueled the African slave trade centuries later. And that's punishable by death in the Torah. So although it seems kind of dehumanizing, at the same time, this is like, as you said, the lesser of two evils. This is much better than any other nation around them. So notice that God is not celebrating slavery as people purport, given this verse. It's about God restraining and redirecting a universal ancient institution until he can kill it completely. And he does. In the New Testament, he does so very clearly, that we will come to just in a few moments. But can you hear God's heart for the slaves? I mean, he is hoping that in their participation in the religion of Israel, they may come to get acquainted with him as their God and find a saving relationship with him. I don't know if you guys can hear that same echo. He wants them to participate in Passover, in the festivals, in the Sabbaths. He wants them to appreciate, as he had given as the blessing to the Israelites, these slaves that come to them as well. But fast forwarding to the New Testament, God ramps up his intentions to reverse slavery. Can either of you remember any verses that talk about slavery in the New Testament?
Look, I know that Jesus made himself like a slave for us, and the apostles talking about, Paul, the bond slave, the slave of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
What about you,
in
Lawson?
terms of the specific application, like being an actual slave? It talks about slaves, respecting their masters and not fleeing.
Yes.
This kind of thing.
And there's there's no slave nor free. We're all one in Jesus, that passage as well. So basically say, look, in Jesus, there's not such distinctions.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. And this is exactly right. Those are some of the verses that I was highlighting as well in my mind. But then we have the story of Philemon, where he's a runaway slave, or the master of the slave, Onesimus, and he gets told that he is no longer a slave by the Apostle Paul, but receive him as a beloved brother. And then one of the other verses that we didn't mention just now was 1 Timothy 1 and verse 10, which condemns men stealers, the slave traders, in the same breath as murderers and the sexually immoral. So, certainly God is doing what he can when the people are ready for it, when they're ready for it. But the church understood this trajectory, and that's why Christians were the driving force behind abolishing slavery everywhere that the gospel went. You think of Wilberforce or the Clapham sect or the Second Great Awakening abolitionists. All of them were quoting scripture. But then someone may ask, well, if God is all-powerful, why not just outlaw slavery right from the outset at Mount Sinai? What would you guys suggest to that? Have you guys got any ideas or thoughts on that?
Just one thing. We have about 30 seconds, 1 minute left to this segment. So I'll let you answer that question for us, Brett.
No worries. So I would say that he could have. But he was working with real human beings in a real ancient world. You see, Israel was a tiny nation surrounded by superpowers built on slavery. An instant total ban could have collapsed their entire economy and invited invasion. Instead, God does what he always does. He enters the mess, limits the damage, protects the vulnerable, and plants the seeds that will eventually overturn the whole system. That's the story of redemption from Genesis to Revelation. God doesn't usually smash evil with a single thunderbolt. He transforms hearts until that evil cannot survive. Yeah. So Exodus 21 isn't the Bible's final word on human dignity. Jesus is. Wow. And when you read it in that light, these verses aren't an embarrassment. They're an evidence of grace being manifest to a broken world.
Wow. Thank you so much, Brad. We really appreciate you coming up and explaining, helping us to understand that otherwise really perplexed passage. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to have you again.